which one is better?
We may have a new contender for best day at work ever.
Welcome to Drive Review. In this episode, Trent explores the hotly anticipated 5-door Suzuki Jimny XL, and I take a spin in the stunning Ferrari Roma Spider through coastal Sardinia. But first, Sam guides us through the features of the stylish new Hyundai Kona hybrid.
No, your eyes do not deceive you. This is a hybrid SUV that for once is not a Toyota. This is the all-new Hyundai Kona. It's a small SUV, but it's also got a hybrid powertrain. So you don't need to plug it in, but it's going to use less fuel and cost less to run over the long term. And there is actually a lot to like about this car in many respects, and it's big. There is a big problem with this vehicle which you need to be aware of if you are in the market. So there's a lot to get through. Let's have a closer look at the Hyundai Kona hybrid. While the new Hyundai Kona range starts from $32,000 plus on-road costs for the base trim level, our test car here sits further up the ladder. Firstly, we've got a 1.6 litre hybrid powertrain option. That adds $4,000 to the asking price over that base engine. However, it's more efficient at 3.9 litres per 100 as a claim versus 6.6 litres per 100 for the 2 litre. The hybrid is slightly less powerful at 104 kilowatts, but there is more torque available with 144 Newton meters from the petrol engine combining with 170 Newton meters from the electric motor. We've got the premium trim level in this test car. That adds $7,500 to the asking price, quite a large amount, but it does add in a fair bit of extra kit. So being a premium spec with the hybrid powertrain, our test car is priced from $43,500 plus on-road costs. When I got inside of this Kona, I did get a bit excited because storage is actually really good, and that's not something you can always say for all small SUVs. So one thing to note firstly, your transmission controls have moved. They're now on a big meaty stalk here off the steering column. They've moved away from this space here, and that means you've got more room to put stuff. Now in front of the passenger, nice big storage shelf there underneath the air vents, a decent sized glove box as well. There's room for bottles in the doors. So I think in terms of storage, this is one of the best small SUVs getting around for just fitting in a lot of your general gear. Another thing to talk about here is the infotainment. So we've got twin 12.3-inch displays here. One of them is the infotainment and one is the big digital driving instrument cluster. And there's lots of controls for the vehicle as well. But it's also countered, I think, quite tastefully by a good old-fashioned air conditioning setup here. Overall, this interior, I think it feels good, it feels well made, and it suits the purpose really nicely of a small SUV. This is the second row of the Kona, and it's worth pointing out that this is actually a fairly large vehicle for the segment. Now let's look at legroom here. That's my driving position up front. I'm a little bit under 6 foot in height, and I've got a fair amount of legroom on offer there actually. It's not too bad. Headroom, it's enough. We've got air vents there. We've got 2 USB-C power outlets, and of course, we've got a pop-down armrest with some cup holders there. So all in all, I do like the space, I do like the comfort. I mean, what else do you need in a small SUV? If you've spent any time behind the wheel of a Toyota hybrid, that could be a Corolla, a Camry, a RAV4, a Corolla Cross, you'll probably feel quite familiar with this Kona. I think the most important thing is that it is quite seamless as it blends those power sources. It's got an electric motor, it's got petrol, it's got a battery, but all of those combined, so it can use pure electric. The petrol kicks in, it's not obtrusive, and then when electric takes over once again, the engine switches off and you barely notice sometimes actually. This does feel like a generally very easy point and shoot car to drive. And of course, the major benefit with this hybrid powertrain is efficiency. Now let's talk about that. The worst I've got after driving this car for around 500 kilometers as part of this test drive that I've been doing, the worst I've seen is about 4.6 litres per 100 Ks. That's against a claim of 3.9, which I think is not too bad, but you can do better than that. If you're driving in more complementary conditions, more stop-start driving, you're using as much regenerative braking as possible, you can get it down to 4.0, 4.2, something like that. Hear that dinging? I'm going to come back to that in a minute, don't you worry. But in terms of efficiency, this is quite good. It's probably better than a Corolla Cross, I would say. Now let's talk about the major problem with this vehicle. A traffic sign recognition system in this vehicle, like others, is, in my opinion, way off the mark. So it's got cameras and it uses a system to read the traffic signs as you drive past them, and then it updates that sign in front of you here. However, it has problems. Sometimes it reads the signs, sometimes it doesn't. So when you're doing the right speed, but the vehicle thinks that you are exceeding the speed limit, it gets a bit cranky with you. It dings and it dongs and it flashes. And yes, you can turn it off. So I think this car, as good as it is, just still needs a bit more work to be done.
Stay tuned for more excitement as Trent goes long in the Suzuki Jimny XL. Welcome back to Drive Review. Still to come, I cruise the Mediterranean coast in the Ferrari Roma Spider.
Pick up a bit of speed. It's certainly got it if you need it.
But first, Trent throws a couple of extra doors on the cult favourite Suzuki Jimny.
New Suzuki Jimny, yes, I know what you're thinking. It's a Suzuki Jimny, I'm aware of that. But this is a Jimny that you haven't seen before. It's one that everybody has been waiting for. It's the Suzuki Jimny XL. This is the 5-door Jimny. It's a 4-seater. To say we've been looking forward to driving this thing is an understatement, but the big ticket that everybody wants to know about with the Suzuki Jimny XL is pricing. Let's look at that first. The Suzuki Jimny XL is priced from $34,990 plus on-road costs, with a 5-speed manual transmission, or $36,490 plus on-road costs, with a 4-speed automatic transmission. The engine makes 75 kilowatts and 130 newton metres, and with the extra weight of the Jimny XL, it certainly doesn't feel fast, but it's not as sluggish as you might expect it to be either. A 9-inch touchscreen, up from 7 inches in the old model, wireless rather than wired Apple CarPlay, digital radio, adaptive cruise control on automatic variants but regular cruise control on the manual, that's shared with the 3-door models, and a metallic accented front grille. And those window switches you can see at the back of the centre console between the seats, they're for the rear windows. The 2024 Suzuki Jimny XL is 3,820mm long, 1,645mm wide, 1,720mm high, and has a wheelbase of 2,590mm. That means that the Jimny XL is 340mm longer nose to tail, and in wheelbase up from 2250 to 2590 from the 3-door model. If you look at the new Suzuki Jimny directly front on or directly from the rear, that's where it's going to be hardest to tell that it's anything other than a regular Suzuki Jimny. But look at it side on like this, you can see exactly where that extended wheelbase has gone. There's a window section at the back and obviously a second door. The crucial element though is whether that extended wheelbase makes a difference when you're inside the cabin. That's what we're going to find out right now. If you're looking at this thinking that it looks like I'm sitting in a Suzuki Jimny, guess what? You're right. This does look and feel like a Suzuki Jimny. The point that everybody wants to focus on, that is right behind me. So importantly, what I've done is I've set myself up for how I'd be driving. This is my position in a manual where I'd be sitting. It's what's in the second row that counts, because now there is a second row with a back door. Let's get in there and check it out. The thing that surprises me the most when I get here in the second row is that there is actually some space here. So of course, that front seat is set where I would be driving, and I can still sit in here. Now, I wouldn't call this a long wheelbase Bentley, and I wouldn't want to sit here and drive all the way from Sydney to Melbourne, but for running around town, practicality for family, if you're not using it all the time, this is actually quite useful. There's plenty of headroom. I've got good visibility. I am sitting up higher, and you know, it's hardly luxurious here, but I'm surprised how much room there is. I do have to say that. You also get 2 ISOFIX points for your baby seats and a 50-50 split for the rear seat there, so you can fold that forward, give you a bit more room to carry longer items if you've got to put them in the luggage area. But all in all, I think Suzuki's done quite a good job in executing this second row to make it practical and useful for people who are going to be buying this Jimny XL. Okay, so side hinging rear door. What I would like with this is that this went a little bit further so it was square. It's not quite all the way square, minor gripe though. The extra wheelbase, and I think this is really important to mention, isn't just into the second row, it also affects the boot space. One quick clever thing that I think is really important for second row passengers is these seats have actually got two settings. So you can put the backrest back a little bit forward, or you can move it forward and set it in there. And then to drop them, one switch, push them forward, and away you go. And then you've got a useful luggage space. Now there is a step up to the seat, obviously, but this is going to work for those of you that are camping, travelling, doing a bit of off-road exploration, two up, and you need to carry some gear. Well, very short road drive for this launch test, but you get behind the wheel of the Jimny XL and, unsurprisingly, feels very much like every other Jimny we've tested. I'm driving a manual at the moment. I expected that with the extra wheelbase, the extra weight, the extra complexity, it might feel a little bit slower than the three-door, even with the same manual transmission, and it doesn't. You do have to work it hard, and you do have to remind yourself that this is an engine that likes to be treated as engines used to a few decades back when they enjoy being redlined. You work them a little hard and you need to get them up to speed. So you need to remember that that's how you have to drive the Jimny. In regard to how it drives around town, it's got that familiar Jimny jiggly way that it copes with bumps, especially on sections where there are repeated bumps and ruts, but it's certainly not uncomfortable. It's actually pretty quiet, even up to 80 kilometres an hour. But if you're buying this predominantly to drive around town, I think it'll do exactly what you want, with the added bonus of you don't have to worry about potholes and poor road surfaces. You just bomb around town and enjoy yourself while you're doing it.
Next on Drive Review, we take the Suzuki Jimny XL off-road, and then we'll be cruising along the Sardinian coastline in the Ferrari Roma Spider. Welcome back to Drive Review. Before we head to the wilds of Sardinia, let's see how the Suzuki Jimny XL manages a bit of off-road.
Unsurprisingly, the long wheelbase Jimny is particularly good off-road. We've just been over a mogul section. Wheel travel's good, grip is good, and it doesn't do anything too weird or scary. What I do love about the Jimny that we're experiencing right now is low range. It is proper low range gearing, and it means that you can crawl uphill, downhill, really confidently in first gear with your foot off the clutch and just let the engine and gearbox do the work. Means that you don't have to use the hill descent control either, which the Jimny does have, but you don't really need it. I'd argue that I wouldn't go with that. What I would do is just put it in first gear as we've done now. And I don't know if you can tell through the window, but we're going down a pretty steep decline, and you just crawl down in first gear. Now, the sad reality is that most Aussies who buy one are never going to do any serious off-roading in it, and you're entitled to do that. It's your car, you can do whatever you like. But if you do buy a Jimny, whether it's a 3-door or a 5-door, get out here and do some off-roading. You're going to love it.
This is the 2023 Ferrari Roma Spider, and Ferrari are using this to reimagine the glory years of open-top Ferrari Grand Tourers of the 1950s and 60s.
The 2023 Ferrari Roma Spider is quite simply the roofless version of the Roma Coupe that launched in 2020. It shares the same 456 kilowatt, 760 newton metre, 3.9 litre twin-turbo V8, 8-speed F1 dual-clutch transmission and rear-drive layout as the Coupe, but it marks a return to a fabric soft top for the first time in almost 20 years. The Roma Spider offers rear seating for children or very slight adults, plenty of personalisation choices, and even debuts a new and exclusive colour, Celeste Trevi, said to capture the famous turquoise colours from its Roman fountain namesake. Pricing starts from $520,300 before options and on-road costs, so start saving now.
Now, one other thing that's worth pointing out here is the automatic deployable spoiler. Now, this has 3 settings that it will go. You can't control it within the car. The car will do everything that it needs to do with a spoiler, so there's no driving around with the wing deployed to look cool as you go into the shops. It's designed to look beautiful, whether it's going or whether it's stopped. Now, the roof itself can be raised and lowered up to speeds of around 60 kilometres an hour, and it does take about 13 seconds end to end.
Traditionally, even with convertible Ferraris, the cars never look quite as sleek when the roof is up. But the Roma's designers have gone to great lengths to make the Spider as stylish as the coupe, even when the roof is closed.
Now, the fabric of the roof is 5 layers thick. Ferrari have actually developed a way of putting in not only sound but heat insulation into the fabric. And you can see in here there's a specific red thread woven into it. So you've got a lovely texture of the roof, but you can actually decide on 5 different colours of contrast stitching and thread built into the fabric for the roof, so you can make your Spider stand out from the crowd. Now, before we hit the road, let's just have a look at some of the parts on the inside of the Roma Spider, because there's some pretty cool stuff. Starting with the passenger gets their own display. They can control their seat comfort, they can control the audio, there's a few other bits and pieces, but they also have the ability to look at the performance display, so they know how fast you're going, which is, either good or bad, depending on who your passenger is. So make sure you won't worry about that before you look at including that part in the car. Obviously, here in the center, you've got a really nice, easy center display. It's running Apple CarPlay at the moment, which is now standard. You've got all of your seat functions, but as you can see, the small tablet is not intrusive in the cabin. It's actually got a high contrast setting, so when the roof is open, you can still see what's on there, which is actually really cool. Here on the steering wheel, and it's very typical Ferraris, everything is done on your steering wheel. So if you've seen F1, this is kind of like a more GT old person version. You've got your indicators up here on the wheel, click once to turn them on, click again to turn them off. You've got your headlight controls there. You've got audio controls on the back of the steering wheel, so you do not need to take your hands off, which is really cool. The most exciting thing, of course, is the Manettino switch. So you've got your key settings. You've got a wet mode, a comfort mode, a sport mode, a race mode, and then you can turn ESC off if you're on a racetrack, which we're not, so we won't be doing that. Now I'm going to move between basically sport, comfort, and race, depending on what the road is like, and it changes the way that the car responds. So it does make driving the Ferrari a little bit more of an interactive experience. So with all that said, you can't ignore that noise. Let's hit the road.
Coming up, we go topless in Italy with the stunning Ferrari Roma Spider. Welcome back to Drive Review. Let's head to Sardinia for a scenic test drive in the Ferrari Roma Spider.
Well, I tell you what, driving a convertible Ferrari along the coastline of Sardinia is never going to be a bad experience. And it's never really going to highlight anything that's anything but glorious. But it's worth pointing out that as a Grand Tourer, the Roma Spider actually manages this in both a relaxing movie star cruise mode, as well as it does a pretty pointy sports stuff. Now, the V8 engine here, obviously twin turbo, you've got that sort of lovely response, but it's not brutal in the same way that we've seen in some other Ferraris. It's not this ridiculously sharp response that means that you're sort of scared or shocked as the car comes on. But as we pick up a bit of speed, it's certainly got it if you need it. Running through some of the basics, obviously you've got the automatic transmission. I'm going to put the windows up just to aid with the wind here. So automatic transmission, you can leave the car in an automatic mode, and we can just tap into that now. And it is actually really, really docile. You see the car will err to 8th gear whenever it can, so it will go for a more efficient running. And for a while there, I'm cruising, and even now, I'm cruising in 8th at barely 1,000 RPM. Response here is okay, like I can squeeze, the car picks up a bit of pace, but if you do change, it will shift down to whatever gear that it thinks that it needs to. So it's very intelligent in that way, that the gearbox is not going to go linearly through the gears. It doesn't sort of have to. It can basically choose where it wants to be. And this is part of, obviously, the learnings that have come from the SF90 Stradale. This 8-speed transmission in a car like the Roma actually works really, really well. Now, obviously, the other cool thing about Ferraris is your Manettino switch. So I'm here in sport. You can go to comfort, which basically dulls things down. You do get the adaptive suspension working this way, and comfort mode has basically everything erring to be a lot more relaxed. And as you can hear, you can barely hear the exhaust. It's really quiet, it's really easy, it's very docile. and it's really nice and light. In sport mode, what you can do is you can tap it in to turn on what Ferrari call bumpy road mode, which I love. And it basically puts the dampers back to their comfort setting that you had in comfort mode. But it means you're actually able to absorb all of these bumps and imperfections in the tarmac, even when you've got the car at a sharper setting. Switch it up again, we can go to race mode, and again, this sort of loosens the car up even more. You've got far sharper gear changes, which if we slow down, and I'll tip it back into a manual mode now, as you squeeze, you get a really sharp pop coming through, and you've got these lovely paddles that are really intuitively placed. Like, you get lights here on the wheel to tell you when to shift, but you can hear it in the audio. So Ferrari have designed the exhaust so that you don't actually really need to be looking at anything but the road ahead. You can listen to the car, and that acts as a shift indicator of sorts. And I tell you what, it's a lot of fun because it doesn't feel daunting, it doesn't feel scary. You can pick up some pretty serious speed pretty quickly in this thing. For me, this is a reimagining of the 365 GTS Daytona Spider. And you've got yourself a car that can be sporty and be particularly fast if you need it to be, but it can also be relaxed and enjoyable, a real movie star of cars.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's episode of Drive Review. For even more details on any of our tested cars, head on over to drive.com.au.